I want to talk today about a really important writing technique called stretch out the good part. Now, when you created your planner, you thought of lots of really important parts in your story. For each of those important parts of your story, you want to try to write a lot. But sometimes authors will kind of rush through the important parts of their story. Like instead of stopping to really describe what happens in a scene and add dialogue, they'll just like rush through to the next scene of the story really quickly. Let me show you an example of what I mean. Here's a story about a dog who becomes a high school quarterback. This dog is named Rover and he's very good at football. Now here's the crucial scene of the story where he throws a touchdown pass. But look how the author kind of forgot to stretch it out. It says, Rover dropped back to pass. He threw a long pass to his wide receiver. It was caught in the end zone for the winning touchdown. Okay, well, it's not terrible writing or anything, but the author didn't really stretch it out. Like, we don't hear any of the details about the pass. We don't hear any of the dialogue. It could have been much better stretched out. It's also just very short. This is a crucial scene in the story. It's really important. And the author should try to make it a little bit longer, like half a page or maybe even a full page. Here's the same scene, but this time it's stretched out a little better. It says, Rover dropped back to pass. The Ravens blitzed all their best pass rushers, but Rover rolled to his left and found a clear passing lane down the field. He cocked his arm and threw a long, high spiral, hurtling towards Jerry Rice, who was sprinting headlong towards the Ravens' end zone. Just as Rice broke away from his defender, the ball arrived, hitting his outstretched fingers. As the clock struck 0, Rice hauled in the ball and tucked it under his left arm and ran for the goal line. The Ravens defenders dived for his ankle, and Rice fell forward, stretching over the line for a touchdown. The Niners fans went berserk. The Niners players lifted Rover over their shoulders. A small farm dog had become the hero of the Super Bowl. In a second, I want you to turn and talk with a partner. I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, what was better about this second scene than the first scene? And secondly, if you were to stretch the scene even more, what could you do to stretch out the scene even more than the author did here? Okay, let's set the timer for 1 minute and let's turn and talk. So you might have said that the author added a lot more detail here. Instead of just saying that Rover threw a touchdown pass, the author was very specific. Like the author told how Rover threw the ball, how the ball was caught, how the fans reacted to it, who caught the ball, all of those details. Now, if you wanted to stretch this scene even more, you could do something that we talked about recently, adding dialogue. Like after Jerry Rice caught the ball, we could hear what Jerry had to say or what Rover had to say. So as you can see, when you write an important scene in your novel, you could write just a sentence or 2 on it, or you could write like half a page or a full page. Now you don't want to stretch out every scene in your story because your story will be super long and you probably won't finish it in time for this class. But for the really important scenes, like the ones on your planner and the boxes, you probably want to stretch those scenes out really well because those are the important scenes in your story. Now we're going to do an activity today that will help you stretch out your scene. We're going to write a scene, and instead of writing it in our journals, we're going to actually write it kind of like a little play, and we're going to act it out. First, let me tell you about the scene. In this scene, some astronauts go to the planet Neptune. It's a fiction make-believe story, so we're going to have the astronauts meet some aliens when they get there. Now, if I was writing a story about some astronauts going to the planet Neptune and meeting aliens, what are some questions that I might have for the scene where the astronauts first meet the aliens? In a second, I'm going to have you talk with a partner, and I want you guys to try to think of as many questions as you can about the scene with the astronauts and the aliens on Neptune. So what are some questions that you might want to answer when you're writing this scene? Let's put up 1 minute and let's turn and talk. So you probably had a lot of questions to ask about the scene. Here are some of the ones I came up with. See if any of the ones that I thought of were also ones that you thought of. But I was thinking about, like, what did the aliens look like? How did they sound? What did the astronauts look like? What were the astronauts' names? What did the spaceships look like for, like, the aliens? The spaceship for the astronauts? What did the aliens say to the astronauts? Were they friendly or mean? Did they have names? And these are just some of the questions that you could answer. Obviously, you're not going to answer every question when you write, but when you stretch a scene really well, you want to try to answer as many questions as you can. And of course, don't forget dialogue and having the characters talk. So here's how the activity will work. You'll be on a team of 3 people in most cases. We might have one group of 2. Your scene is going to have 3 actors. One actor will play the alien, one actor will play the astronaut, and there'll be one narrator. It's important to have a narrator because the narrator is going to tell some of the things that we want to know about the scene. For instance, the narrator might talk about, like, what the spaceships look like, or what Neptune looks like, or the names of the different astronauts. I'd like your teacher to put me on pause for a second while your teacher passes out an example of what the play could look like. Okay, if you take a look at the play example here, you'll see that there are 3 different parts. One of the parts is the narrator, and then 2 other parts are where the alien is talking to the astronaut. Now, this might be a little bit tricky because when you write it, you want to try to not copy what I wrote. So you're going to have to think up your own idea for what could happen when the astronaut meets the alien. So it can be similar, but just try to make sure that yours is different from mine. Let's put the timer on 1 minute, and I'm going to have you read over this scene that I wrote so you can kind of get a sense of how to do it. Okay, let's put up 1 minute and go ahead and read. All right, so here's the order of work. First of all, you're going to work with your two partners to write the script for this scene. You'll have a piece of paper that looks like this. Then, when you're finished, you'll go to a corner of the room and you will act out your play. So you'll practice acting it out and learning the lines. You can pass the script back and forth between the people in your group while you're still learning your lines. Practice it a few times until your teacher calls you over. And during the next class, you'll actually act it out for the whole class so they can see your scene. Don't forget the reason that we're doing this. We're practicing stretching out a scene. So remember to try to answer as many questions as you can about the astronauts and the aliens and Neptune when you're writing your script. Your teacher will give out the script papers, and your teacher will be giving points to people working really hard to really stretch out their scenes very well. Oh, and make sure your scene has at least 8 lines. All right, let's set the timer. We're going to take about 20 minutes to write our scripts and practice them. So let's put up 20 minutes and let's begin. All right, I hope your scripts came along really well and that you got a chance to start practicing your plays. Like I said, we're going to act those out for the class a little later, so that will be very exciting to see what you came up with. We're going to continue our work on our stories now. So we're going to work for about 20 minutes. Don't forget to stay on track with your planner and keep working and following that planner as you write. And don't forget to stretch out your scenes. Your teacher will be coming around to give you a goal for this 20-minute period. If you reach your goal, you can earn 3 points. Okay, let's begin. Okay, we've learned a lot of things in our class already. We've learned about stretching out the good part, using red pen words, using colorful characters. We've talked about using specific language. We've talked about dialogue. We're learning a lot. What we're going to do next is we're going to read a little story. It's called Eli, and it's by Bill Peet, and it's one of my favorite stories. And while I'm reading you the story, I'm going to have you do a few turn and talks because I want you to think about what the author, his name is Bill Peet, what he's doing in the story. Like, is he stretching out a scene well? Is he creating a colorful character? Some of the things that we've learned in this class so far. Now, you might not have ever had a video teacher read you a story before, so here's how it's going to work. I'm going to read the story here, but I'm going to put up the images from that page up on the screen so that you can see them a little bit better. You have a mission while I'm reading the story, though. Your mission is to think about the things we've learned in this class so far and see if Bill Peet is doing any of them. Okay, so let's read Eli by Bill Peet. Now, once upon a time, there was a lion named Eli who lived in a faraway land of Kumbum-Bazango. He was a decrepit old cat with a scruffy mop of mane, and most of the thunder had gone out of his roar. Now, after many long years as a proud king of beasts, the old lion had finally become as meek as a mouse. Poor Eli. Whenever the other lions gathered for a feast, Eli didn't dare join in. It was much too rough. One big snarling free-for-all, with every cat for himself. So the old fellow waited until the lions all had their share and the hyenas and jackals had eaten their fill of the leftovers. Finally, Eli joined a squawking, squabbling flock of vultures for the scraps and small bits he could find in the clutter of bones. The noisy birds were a nagging nuisance to the old lion, and he tried to avoid them as best he could. Whenever a vulture ventured too close, Eli scared the bird off with a rumbling growl. So I want you to turn and talk. Bill Peet's created a kind of colorful character here. What's different or interesting about Eli that makes him colorful? Let's put up 30 seconds and turn and talk. So when you think of most lions, you think of like ferocious beasts. They're usually very strong and loud, but Eli's different. He's as meek as a mouse. That means he's like quiet and timid and shy, and he's like not very powerful anymore. It's a kind of interesting character that I'd like to read about. So let's read a little more. An old cat like me can't afford to be choosy, he grumbled, or too proud to have dinner with these beggars, so I must put up with their bad manners and their awful squawking. But I'll never make friends with the lowly creatures, not as long as I live. So Eli really doesn't want to make friends with these vultures. By the way, vultures are kind of like birds that feast on like dead animals. They tend to eat the animals that are dead. So nobody really likes vultures usually. Now, after a time, Eli was able to ignore the birds by pretending they weren't there, just as if he were having dinner alone. Then one day, an old vulture let out a terrible, ear-splitting scream. The lion shivered and shook all the way to his toes. But the bird kept screaming and screeching until Eli couldn't stand it anymore, and suddenly he turned on her in a snarling fury. But when he realized that she was actually screaming for help, that a jackal had caught her by a wing and was about to drag her away, Eli took pity on the poor bird. In one frantic leap, and with a wild swing of a paw, Eli caught the jackal with a clout, it's like a punch, to the snout and sent the little rascal yelping away with his tail between his legs. Take a look at that one sentence where Bill Pete describes Eli helping the bird. Do you see any of the things that we've learned to do in this class that Bill Pete did in that sentence? Take 30 seconds and turn and talk. So I thought this was like a pretty good mind picture that Bill Pete wrote describing how Eli helped the bird. Like it really describes well how he did it. He didn't write very long, but you could have also said that he did a good job stretching out this part because it's just a quick little scene and he like really described it well. So you could have said like a mind picture or stretch out the good part. Now, once the old bird was free, she was surrounded by a dozen fussy, fretting friends. "Vera, Vera," they cried, "you poor thing! Are you hurt? Are you hurt?" "Not in the least," said Vera, "thanks to that dear old lion." "He is a dear!" the birds exclaimed. "One prince of a fellow!" All at once the vultures were flocking around Eli, singing his praises in loud, screechy voices. "Leo's a jolly good fellow! Leo's a jolly good fellow! Leo's a jolly good fellow! Oh, what a great lion he is!" "My name is not Leo," snarled the miserable lion. "I'm Eli, and I'm not great. There's nothing great about saving a worthless old bird. It was nothing at all, so forget it." So in this page, Bill Pete could have written something like, the birds now liked Eli, but Eli was annoyed that they liked him. But instead, he did something else that we learned about in this class. Turn and talk with a partner. What did you see on this page that Bill Pete did well? Ready? Turn and talk. So as you probably said, Bill Pete used some nice dialogue here. He had the birds talking to Eli and Eli talking back, and he added a little humor. Like sometimes lions are called Leo. A lot of lions have the name Leo. So the birds think his name is Leo, and of course it's not. And so it's kind of funny to see Eli being liked by these birds, but he doesn't like it. So good dialogue, Bill Pete. But the vultures were never going to forget Eli, not after such a great act of kindness to one of their flock. To them he was a hero whether he liked it or not, and to the old lion's dismay, the birds followed him wherever he went. If he took a morning stroll, his faithful followers, the birds, came fluttering along a short distance behind. He looked so annoyed in that picture. In the heat of the afternoon, when the old lion flopped down in the shade of his favorite tombaba tree for a cat nap, the vultures were there too, roosting in the branches above. "I see enough of these birds at dinner time," grumbled Eli, "without being stuck with them morning till night. Enough is enough, and I have an idea of how to get rid of these pests once and for all. I'll insult them. I'll call them all the meanest, most horrible things I can think of, and after that they'll never want to see me again." So I have another quick question for you. What is the conflict in this story? Ready? Turn and talk. There is a problem or a conflict in this story, which is Eli suddenly is being liked by all these birds that he doesn't like. They think he's a hero, but he just wants them to go away. Let's read one more page and then we'll take a little break and read more of Eli later. So raising his voice to a rumble to make sure all the birds could hear, the lion let them have it. "You good-for-nothing, grubby old bone pickers, you flea-bitten beggars, you ugly old coots, you give me the creeps. Skedaddle, take off, get a tree of your own, leave me be." For a minute the vultures were so horrified by the sudden outburst they were left goggle-eyed and speechless. Good word there, goggle-eyed. Finally Vera, the old bird Eli had rescued, spoke up. "I can't blame you for feeling this way," she said. "We are indeed creepy old things. We will do as you wish and leave you be. But no matter what you say, we're still your friends, and in some way we old birds might prove useful someday." I wonder if they will prove useful. We're going to finish up the story, Eli, next time. In the meantime, you might think about or predict what might happen in the story. Maybe the birds will help Eli in some way. We're going to be working to the rest of the class on our stories, and your teacher will come around to give you a goal again. Remember, you can earn 3 points for reaching your goal. Okay, so we're going to work for the rest of the class, and let's begin.